Hey, what's going on, everybody? On this episode of the Breaking the Game podcast, we have Lee Branscome of the Which Carolina Twitter handle and of hoopsprospects.com. And we're going to be giving 10 NBA team draft grades on how they did on this year's draft. You're not going to want to miss it. We'll be right back after this break. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Breaking the Game podcast. I am one of the co-hosts here, Stephen Gillespie, joined by my better half, Austin Carr. Austin, what's up, brother?
Hey, what's going on, man? I'm excited for today's show. We got a special guest, as everybody can see, so I'm pretty excited to get this one going.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the NBA draft is over, so we brought back our friend of not only just our show, but to the Off the Ball Network at large, Mr. Lee Branscome. What's going on, brother?
Stephen, Austin, I appreciate you having me back, and I appreciate y'all letting me, post or spout some post-draft opinions as we all kind of, I guess, have let the draft marinate, for a few days now, and getting all the trades straight, figuring out exactly who went where, and trying to project, what this rookie class might be able to do in the NBA season, which starts in like a month.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, the last time we had you on, we did a little bit of, just different draft segments, who are the best prospects in our eyes, who are the guys not to buy the hype on, and who are some sleepers that we could, kind of expect to come in a little bit undervalued and then down the line, overperform that. But Lee, before we get into the teams, man, I just want to ask you, what were your overall thoughts on this draft? Were you, largely surprised that it go the way that you expected? I'm sure you could probably pick it apart one way or the other, but at large, how did you feel about the draft?
Yeah, at large, it went fairly as I expected, I think, honestly. I mean, and obviously we're going to talk about a lot of these teams. A couple of the surprises early didn't shock me as much as I think it might have some other people. I think the one thing that did surprise me, though, was, we didn't get any trades until like halfway through the first round. So I think everyone was kind of sitting there anticipating a bunch of moves in the first 10 picks. And, all of a sudden you look up and we're at 12 or 13 and nothing had happened from a trade front. So as far as like the way the selections went down, there were a couple of minor surprises for me, but on the whole, I thought it was pretty expected for the most part. But yeah, just the fact that we didn't get any trades until we got much later in the first round was the one thing that kind of threw me off a little bit.
Yeah, I can buy into that too. And like you said, like towards the end, it was like right after the lottery, it felt like it was like, okay, now we're going to start seeing some different trades made. But we did have some trades kind of leading into the draft that were
right.
That did kind of help that upper part of the draft too. So you kind of had to look for it a little bit, but it wasn't as in your face as what we're, typically used to seeing, especially with, as all experts have been saying, that this hasn't been a draft that's very sexy as far as like big names, potential stars. It's more of like a free agency, or excuse me, not a free agency, but like a role player type draft, similar to what we're seeing in free agency right now. Right. So, good stuff. We're going to go ahead and get started, though, Austin. The Atlanta Hawks are going to be our first team. Austin, real quick, your takes on how Atlanta did. They took Onyeka Okongwu 6th and Skylar Mays 50th.
Well, to be honest, I was kind of surprised. Like Lee said, that this is where I kind of expected there to be a trade. I kind of thought Atlanta would move this pick. They have a lot of young talent. They've drafted really high in the draft the last few years, and they had made it kind of a stated goal to get a little bit of veteran help and to try to, field a team that's going to compete for the playoffs this year. And so I was a little surprised that they kept their pick. But I mean, other than maybe Obi Toppin, I don't know that there was a better prospect left at 6 than Okongwu. we talked about him when Lee was on the last time. And we both, we all kind of said that we had some, ifs about him, and we had some questions about him. But ultimately, he is, a monster athlete. He does, a lot of things really well that I think will really, really help Atlanta. Will really kind of, he'll be a good backup, I think, for their starting big men. Whether it's John Collins and Capella or whoever that ends up being, probably those two. I think he'll be a great third big man off the bench for them. He's going to bring in kind of that energy and effort and excitement off the bench. So I think that was a good pick. Skylar Mays, you guys will have to kind of school me on him a little bit. I don't know as much about him as probably you guys do, but yeah. So I like their first pick for sure.
Excellent. Lee, what do you think, man? I know that Okongwu was not really a guy that we were hearing a lot of buzz projected to go towards Atlanta. How did you handle that?
Yeah, so for an overall draft grade, I kind of have Atlanta slotted in like that A- range. I thought they did a terrific job. Okongwu, they took him number 6. He was the 5th rated prospect on my board, so I thought they got terrific value there. I thought Okongwu was the best big in the draft, so I love that they went ahead and selected him at 6. Obviously, Wiseman ahead of him, and then Skylar Mays at 50. I had Skylar Mays 33rd on my board, so I thought that was unbelievable value for them to get him late in the second round. The only reason it's not an A+ is because, as you guys know, I'm a massive Tyrese Halliburton fan. I would have taken, as are you guys. I would have taken Halliburton, but at the same time, I understand why they might want to add more of a defensive presence to their lineup to go along with Trae Young and John Collins and Herter and Reddish and DeAndre Hunter. Obviously, the Hawks have been super active this offseason. They added Danilo Gallinari. They've signed Bogdanovich to an offer sheet, so we'll see if they're able to pry him away from Utah. And I thought Skylar Mays filled one of Atlanta's most desperate needs, which was, can you acquire some players that can keep your offense afloat when Trae Young is out of the game? Because as good as Trae Young is offensively and as dynamic as the Hawks offensively were just a complete mess when he had to rest last year. So the rumors are, I don't know if this is official yet, they're saying Rondo is also headed to Atlanta. So between Rondo and Skylar Mays, I think they solved that issue of an offensive organizer when Trae Young is off the floor. So all in all, man, I thought the Hawks did a terrific job, and it pains me to say that because I'm a Charlotte fan. So I'm kind of trying to shed away my bias here and give an actual opinion.
All right, well, I'm going to try to make you a little bit happier here since you're a Charlotte fan. I only gave them a C+.
Okay.
You know that I'm not that big of an Okongwu guy, and I spoke to the reasons why. I think that the reasons defensively that he gets so much praise, I don't think is going to really translate that well into the NBA, right? Like he struggled on guarding on the perimeter, and he struggled in the pick and roll. When he was posted up, obviously, with his frame, he's going to be able to handle most collegiate athletes, right? So, and plus, I didn't feel like the redundancy that he's going to give with Capella. And obviously, it's like I actually kind of like him in this role better as opposed to maybe going to Charlotte and being the starter. I do kind of like him. Everyone is comparing this guy to Bam Adebayo. Like, how much more Bam Adebayo does it get to be, drafted, and you're going to probably be starting behind a guy for a year or so, right? So maybe that'll allow his skills to develop a little bit more. Won't be as high a demand. Like you, I feel like Tyrese Halliburton was the better fit for in a lot of ways, especially team need. Skylar Mays, I wasn't really high on him, but when you get to the 50s, if you got a guy that you believe in, it's kind of hard to knock a team and be like, no, you should have drafted, X, Y, or Z player instead, because we'll talk about this later with the Golden State Warriors. this late in the draft, if you got a guy, you got a guy, go ahead and get him. They did, like you mentioned, go and get Rajon Rondo and Chris Dunn in free agency. So they're addressing the defensive sides. Bogdanovich, that'll be interesting to see if he gets out of Sacramento on that deal or not, because he is a restricted free agent.
Oh, yeah, I said Utah, didn't I?
yeah, the other Bogdanovich, right?
Yeah.
So,
okay, I mess them up all the time.
Lord.
I just call him the Boston Bogdanovich and the Sacramento Bogdanovich, so you're good.
Yeah, there you go. But overall, I give them a C+ due to already having Clint Capella. I thought that maybe the Gordon Hayward trade would happen with Atlanta and maybe bring in a Clint Capella. So I don't know. We'll kind of see what happens with your team, right? And we'll talk about them here in a little bit. But overall, I give the Atlanta Hawks a C+.
Yeah, totally fair. I mean, I think the redundancy point with him and Capella is a valid reason for concern. And then Skylar Mays, the one thing I'll say about him, obviously he's an upperclassman from LSU. He was basically a 50-40-90 shooter at LSU, just an incredibly efficient, kind of on the ball guard. He can play make, he can shoot. He's a tough defender. But it's important to remember, like, historically, almost none of these second round picks are going to work out. So
exactly.
To your point, like, if you've got a guy you like after 40, pick 40, just go for it, because at the end of the day, you want to live with your own opinions, right? And most of these guys aren't going to work out anyway. So I like Skylar Mays a lot, but again, at that point in the draft, the likelihood of him sticking in the NBA is historically low, but I think he has a chance.
Yeah, there you go. And like I said, like, you had him in the 30s, I had him in the upper 60s, right? So like I'm sure there were a lot of teams that had him pegged in that wide range, correct? So moving on, we're going to roll into the Boston Celtics. Now, from what I've seen on your Twitter handle, Lee, I've seen you speak glowingly, particularly of one guy that they have drafted that I'm not so high on. So I think that we'll probably have wavering opinions for draft grades here. What did you give the Boston Celtics as their overall grade?
So I think I'm against the grain on this one. I don't think the Celtics are getting very rave reviews from draft Twitter or even kind of your more traditional NBA draft media. But I've got the Boston Celtics with a B, the solid B here. They grabbed Aaron Nesmith, probably the best shooter in this draft, from Vanderbilt at 14. I had him 16th on my board, so right in that range. Number 26 is Peyton Pritchard, probably the guy that you're referring to.
Correct.
I had Peyton Pritchard 23rd on my board. So as shocked as everyone was to see him go off in the first round, I was not surprised at all. They traded pick 30, which was Desmond Bane, to Memphis. They got 2 future second rounds out of that. So kind of call that a wash. I know a lot of people really like Desmond Bane. I think Memphis did good to grab him there. And then 47th was Yam Madar, which is an Israeli point guard who they figure to bring over right away, I believe. And I had him 40th on my board. So even though there's some redundancy there, I think Peyton Pritchard, he's obviously the senior Oregon point guard, Pac-12 player of the year, 40% three-point shooter, effortless range, tough as nails, a little bigger than people give him credit for, a little better defender than people give him credit for. Just a guy who's played in a ton of big games as like a role player on a Final Four team when he was a sophomore, and then as a junior and a senior as kind of a dominant ball handler on 2 really good Oregon teams. His senior year, they won the regular season in the Pac-12. I think Peyton Pritchard is going to be contributing for Boston in big games this year. He looks like a vacuum salesman, but the Celtics fans are going to be pleasantly surprised, in my opinion. So I'm certainly not in the majority on that opinion, but I am willing to kind of put my neck out there a little bit for old Peyton.
Well, there you go. You put your name on it, man, and that's what I love. We have a guy that we're going to talk about later in drafts, right, that I am like through the moon about, that I seem to be like the only buddy, banging his drum.
Yep.
But I like your point about Peyton Pritchard. He's going to be one of those, your Alex Caruso's, your Brian Cardinals, your Matt Bonner. He's going to be the white guy in the NBA that doesn't look like he should be out there, right? But you feel like he's going to do well. Austin, What is your feelings on how Boston did in this draft, brother?
I actually had them in the B plus range as well. I like their picks a lot. I'm a big Aaron Nesmith fan for sure. Anytime a team that needs shooting can get that kind of shooting with two different picks in the draft, both guys are over 40% 3-point shooters for their career. And I kind of have an affinity for upperclassmen in the draft as well too. So Peyton Pritchard was one that I really like too. I like picks that can come in, especially for a team like Boston that's already, has championship aspirations. They're already trying to get to the conference finals every year or the finals. They need to bring in guys that can contribute right now. That third pick, the second round pick, Yam Madar, I would have liked to see them take a big guy there. I don't know who necessarily, but they need to get some size on the inside, I think. And
right.
That was what kept them from getting an A for me, is just like you guys said, there was a little bit of redundancy in that pick there. But the first two picks, I think they knocked it completely out of the park. So I had them as like a B plus.
Yeah, I have them at just a C. I think that I really would have loved to see Kira Lewis Jr. fall to that very next pick, which Boston had. I think that they would have took him in a heartbeat. Aaron Nesmith makes sense on the shooting front, but Boston does a lot of, their defensive scheme relies on everybody doing a little bit, right? And I don't project Nesmith to be that plus style defender, even though he's got an NBA body, as far as, height and weight and, just overall definition, things like that. I just don't project him to be one of those plus size defenders. You got Marcus Smart, you got Tatum, you got Brown, a lot of good defenders. When you kind of have that weakness, NBA teams are going to attack that, especially in the finals, which we were just all talking about, right? That how they have those aspirations. Nesmith obviously probably won't be in those positions. I mean, to his credit, though, when you can shoot over 53% from the 3-point line, you kind of have a skill that a lot of NBA teams are looking for. We just saw guys like Davis Bertans, get stupid money, right, for having that one particular skill. Peyton Pritchard, I'm lower on than you, Lee. I had him in my 40s. Between the two of those guys, I really would have liked to see like a Cole Anthony and RJ Hampton, maybe even Emmanuel Quickly, if you're trying to address that 3-point shooting, right, and still have that defensive intensity. Lee, you and I both share that same sentiment that Quickly is a highly underrated defender coming into the NBA. So I would have liked to see those guys go, and instead of where Nesmith and Pritchard were taken. Madar, I'm not going to beat up too much. I didn't have him as high as others. I know a lot of people kind of liken his ball handling style to that, 1990s New York ball handler style. He's one of those guys that gets in the face of his, opponent, and that rubs people the right way a lot of times. Lee, you were talking about, Boston wants to bring him in quickly. From what I'm hearing, a lot of scouts and a lot of, executives are saying that he wants to come over, but he's probably better off as a draft and stash guy for at least a year. So it's going to be interesting to see what Boston does on that front. Maybe they bring him over initially on a 2-way contract just to kind of make him happy, right? So overall, I gave them a C, Lee.
Yep, that's fair. Yeah. Yam is probably the second best on-ball defender as a guard in this draft, maybe behind Trae Young. I mean, he's just a ferocious kind of irritant on the ball. He's still improving as a shooter, kind of more of a off the dribble pull up guy than he is a catch and shoot right now. I think your point is good. I don't know that you'll see him right away on the Celtics like active 15 NBA roster. Maybe he's more of a 2-way guy right now. But he's a really nice long-term point guard prospect, where Pritchard can hopefully, if I'm correct, hopefully he can plug in at that backup point guard position. And I think he's an upgrade over Brad Wanamaker. And then Nesmith, like I said, I had him at 16. They drafted him at 14. He's a big-time movement shooter, but one-dimensional. But like,
did we lose him?
That you can kind of understand taking a gamble. The point about a big guy is fair. I mean, Tice and Robert Williams are both. They just traded away. I get the point about they maybe should have thrown a dart at the front court, dartboard talent, type of thing. But overall, I really liked it more than most.
Yeah, and those are all fair points. I to my credit, I did have Nesmith, I think 21st on my board. So seeing him taken a little bit higher, really you evaluate draft prospects in tiers anyway, right? So probably he's closer tier-wise than he is numerically on my board to where he was selected. President Chris LeBron for the Off the Ball Network. Lee, you're very familiar with Chris. Y'all do a lot of great stuff together as well.
He's the best.
He just said that Yam has some Brooklyn in his DNA. So that's why I'm telling you, right? Like he gets
He'll
a lot
pick
of
you
the
up 94 feet. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's got like some Gary Payton, type of and he'll let you know about it too as he's playing.
Competitive kid.
Yeah, super competitive guy. But that's a great transition from having Brooklyn in your DNA to now we're talking about the Brooklyn Nets.
Look at that.
Awesome. Yeah, right. I did a good job there. I'll give myself a little pat on the back. All right. So the Brooklyn Nets had the 19th pick overall. In a real funky deal that they did on draft day, they ended up flipping that in order to bring in Landry Shamet, which, I'll go ahead and say, I think if you draft Landry Shamet 19th in this draft, you're doing a pretty good job, right? Yep. So I think that's fair. And then all the way down at 57, they selected Reggie Perry, that kind of combo forward center out of Mississippi State. Austin, what did they do to move your needle, brother?
Honestly, in terms of actual draft grade, I gave them a C just because they only had the one pick in the second round. But the moving that pick they had in the first round for Landry Shamet, I think was a great move for them. They're another team that, they need guys that can come in right now and contribute more so than, a prospect or a project type of guy. So I gave them a C overall for the draft, just mostly because they moved that first round pick, but I do like Landry Shamet a lot. I think he's going to come in, and he seems like a guy, one of the few guys on that team that maybe doesn't have like a huge outspoken personality that'll
not yet
kind of be able to take a back seat to some guys and not have a problem with it. So, I think all in all, that was a good move for them, but I just gave them a C, just like I said, because they only had the second round pick.
Okay, that's fair. Lee, I know that we kind of talked about how we went into watching Mississippi State games looking to evaluate, Mr. Reggie Perry, and came more so impressed out of those evaluations with Robert Woodard III. That being said, I'm kind of high on Reggie Perry being the 57th pick, especially to Brooklyn, who, when you look at their team needs, they do need that kind of front court help. I'm not saying he's going to come in and give it to you, but, taking a guy who averaged 20, 10, and a couple blocks in the SEC at 57, and then walking away with Landry Shamet, I gave them an A.
Nice. Yeah. So I'll say the positive thing about the Reggie Perry pick first. I think it makes sense. Obviously, again, you get a guy that late. It's really hard to nitpick these super late second round guys, but Reggie Perry is a different type of post player than the three post players they already have on their roster. So Nick Claxton, Jarrett Allen, and DeAndre Jordan are all kind of in that super long rim protector, floor runner profile. Like they're all very similar. Whereas Reggie Perry is much more bulkier. He's more of a face-up guy. He can catch the ball and make a play for himself. He's much more offensively centric minded, I would say. So I like the fact that at least they swung on a big who has a different type of basketball profile than the posts are already on their team. That's about the last positive thing I have to say about this draft for Brooklyn. I mean, I do like the Shamet deal. They also picked up Bruce Brown, which is a guard I've kind of always had an affinity for.
Yeah,
I thought he was undervalued in his draft class. But man, they moved Sadiq Bey with the 19th pick, who I thought would have just been
fair point.
A terrific kind of ready-made 3-and-D guy who doesn't need the ball in his hands and can guard. Now, that being said, they did re-sign Joe Harris, so maybe their thinking is, we're kind of set from that position. Reggie Perry was an undrafted guy for me. He wasn't in my top 60, so I had a C-.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I feel like this is kind of like what you'll see. Like this is a nutshell of what you'll see how everyone evaluated this draft, just how wide ranging, how the grades are, right? Like I give them a straight up A because I didn't like Reggie Perry, but I think that the fact that I didn't like him at where he was projected early in the year, I feel like how we were talking about earlier, right? Like if you like a guy, you just take him at 57, right? And, 20 and 10 and a couple blocks, very efficient. Actually showed flashes of a little bit of touch outside the paint. So I don't know. I mean, but I also, like we said earlier, I also understand, how people got to be disenchanted with the idea of taking a Reggie Perry as well, right? All right, Lee, I'm gonna let you lead this one off, man, because this is your breadbasket, man. This is your hometown Charlotte Hornets. So just go ahead and take this one away, man.
Boy, it was an exciting night to be a Hornets fan. I mean, not only did we get some lottery luck and have the third pick in the draft, but we also made an acquisition to have 3 picks now in the second round. So I'll just go ahead with the overall grade first, B+. And now, I'll just list off who we got. So obviously at number 3, the Hornets were able to corral LaMelo Ball, who is probably the most famous name in this draft and potentially eventually the best player in this draft. I had LaMelo Ball number 4 on my board. So the only player that was available that I had ahead of him was Patrick Williams. But I completely understand why the Hornets would prefer LaMelo Ball on their roster than a Patrick Williams type. Number 32 was Vernon Carey Jr., the freshman center from Duke. I had him at 32 on my board. So obviously I like the value there. Number 42, we traded to acquire Nick Richards. Nick Richards, the junior from Kentucky, was a player that I had dropped in a lot of the kind of who's an underrated prospect in this draft. I had him at 25th on my board, so I thought Nick Richards was a complete home run for Mitch Kupchak in the front office here. And then you grab Grant Riller at 56. He was 44th on my board. So as much as I was kind of going against the grain of draft Twitter, which a lot of people had Grant Riller in their first round, if you get him at 56, like all of a sudden I love it. You know what I mean?
Right. It makes sense there.
Yeah, absolutely. So all in all, this was a terrific draft. I mean, LaMelo Ball, look, there's plenty of debates to be had about if he will ever reach what his best case outcome represents. I don't know if he'll ever get there. But the fact of the matter is LaMelo Ball's best case outcome profile is incredibly unique and special. I mean, if everything works out, and that's a big if, because he has a arduous, tough task ahead of him to become what he could be. But he is that kind of heliocentric, on-the-ball engine that can create constant, efficient offense for himself and others because of his kind of God-given vision on the basketball floor. He's already an incredible passer. So my point here is basically just that if you're going to swing for the fences, if you're a small market team like Charlotte and you can bring in a LaMelo Ball, if I'm a betting man, do I think he becomes his ultimate best case outcome? Probably not. But if he does, you're set. I mean, you have made the draft of your decade. So everything hinges on Ball. Last couple things I'll say is Vernon Carey Jr. I get the pick. Charlotte needs to continue to add front court talent. Cody Zeller's playing on an expiring contract this year. I liked Oturu there more than I did Vernon Carey Jr.
I can see that.
I liked Robert Woodard there. So that's the only reason why I didn't really have it at A, just because even though Vernon Carey was exactly in the range that I liked him, I just thought there were better options on the board at the time. I've talked ad nauseum about Nick Richards, so I'll spare you guys on that one. And then Grant Riller, solid value. I think he'll compete for the third point guard position and may spend some time at the Greensboro Swarm D League as well. But I think he's a guy who will certainly he will compete in camp and make a strong case for himself potentially to be on the active roster.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me do my Hornets rant.
No, you're totally fine, man. Like that's your team, bro. Like that's what I say. You kind of take it away. I'll just give you my quick cliff notes on this. Gave him an A. I like the draft better than you did apparently for your team, brother. And I understand like when you love a team, you tend to be a little bit more critical than anyone else, right? I like Ball there. I think it works for Ball because it's probably one of the smaller markets that doesn't get a lot of attention. So that I think that kind of helps him a little bit to be able to make some mistakes. But at the same time, I think that it also hurts him because it's going to be harder for him to get more help on that team. Although from what I'm hearing, Gordon Hayward is going to be there. We'll see who's involved and potentially a trade back to Boston. Maybe Terry Rozier gets traded, and that opens things up for a guy like Grant Riller, who I didn't have in my top 60. Apparently other NBA teams felt the same way, but like I said earlier, like when you're in the 50s and you got a guy who you like, totally understand getting him, especially with a guy who's got the ceiling like a Grant Riller. I had Vernon Carey Jr. actually, looking at it real quick. I had him 23rd on my board.
Yeah.
So I really liked his game a lot, and I love that in his downtime he got in better shape, lost weight, going to be a little bit more mobile. I think that he and Nick Richards give you two different types of centers, and grabbing these guys in the second round. I don't know if you touched on this or not, but also when you can kind of build that NBA stable of centers that we're starting to see develop around the league on second round contracts, that's extremely great value. I had Richards 30th on my board overall. And like I said, I wasn't in love with Riller as a prospect, but being drafted that late, I understand the merit, and I understand the reasoning behind that selection. Austin, do you have anything you want to add on the Hornets?
Yeah, I gave them an A as well. I really like the LaMelo Ball pick for me. To be honest, I think he's going to be the rookie of the year. And, in a draft where there's as many, unknowns as there supposedly are in this draft, or guys that are, may not end up being superstars, you've got Anthony Edwards and James Wiseman that went ahead of him. Both kind of had issues with, do they really love basketball or not? I mean, LaMelo Ball, there's a video of him when he's 8 years old saying, I'm LaMelo Ball and I'm going to be an NBA star one day. Like, he loves basketball. Like, you don't have to worry about him not bringing it. And then the two big guys, I mean, anytime you can get, a Duke prospect and a Kentucky prospect, they've been coached well, get them in the second round like that. And then I was actually pretty high on Grant Riller. I like that pick a lot. He's another upperclassman guard that can come in right away, and we know he can score the ball for sure. So I gave them an A. I like their draft a lot.
Excellent stuff. All right. Well, we're going to roll into a draft that I really had no idea. I heard you say that you actually did like Patrick Williams a lot there, Lee. What did you grade Chicago at overall for their draft?
Yeah, so Chicago's pretty short and sweet for me. I mean, at number 4, you get Patrick Williams, the freshman from Florida State. Like I said, he was 3rd on my board, which was, particularly pretty high compared to most. I've been kind of beating the Patrick Williams drum for months. I wrote about him back in June and said that he has the biggest star, the biggest wing star upside in this draft for anyone not named Anthony Edwards. So I've been on Patrick Williams for a long time. I just simply think he's going to become a star. I mean, people have kind of asked me for comps. I don't love comps, but the comps I see for him are more like these stretch 4 athletic types, and he's got much more high-end wing centric skills than I think people are realizing even yet. I mean, he's got unearthed ability to kind of handle the ball in pick and roll situation. He gets to pull up jumpers. He can score in isolation. He's a kind of transcendent athlete defensively. I mean, from a block and steal percentage standpoint, he ranks up there with all of the most special college players we've seen come out. So based on that, I give the Bulls an A just because they had the guts to swing for Patrick Williams. I think they're right. Don't have a lot on 44, Marko Simovic. I think I'm sure I mispronounced that. I think
it's
he is
Simonovic, but yeah.
Simonovic. There we go.
Bless you.
Yeah, exactly. I imagine he's a draft and stash guy. He's one of the international players. Unfortunately, I really didn't get to a whole lot. But just based on how I've felt about Patrick Williams through this whole process, I'm super pumped for Chicago. I think they have a future star. And people have forced me to give a comp. I think he's more of a Pascal Siakam type than he is like an athletic 4 that can't put the ball on the floor.
Wow. Okay. But he's obviously not as sturdily built, I would say, as Pascal. Not yet. Right. Austin, what are your takes on Chicago?
I love the Bulls draft, to be honest. That Patrick Williams pick at number 4. I did think Obi Toppin would be their pick there. That's kind of just what I had been hearing a lot of. But I didn't know a whole lot about Patrick Williams until after they selected him. But everything that I've read and everything that I've heard about, I love. He seems like, I heard a story on NBA radio that, he was such a high riser so late in the process that the day before the draft, the Warriors scheduled like an emergency meeting with him because they heard how many other teams were so high on him, and they wanted to know, what did we miss about this guy? So, I think, what Lee said is spot on about him. And then Simonovic, is that how you say it?
I've been saying Simonovic.
Simonovic. Okay, we'll go with that.
Usually those
good.
names kind of roll off the tongue like that,
butchered
right?
that so bad.
I could be completely wrong.
He is going to be a draft and stash for at least a year. I did read that, and but I think he's got great potential. He's a 7-footer that can handle the ball. He can shoot a little bit. He's kind of the the prototypical stretch big man that the NBA loves all of a sudden. So I like that pick a lot too. I don't know if necessarily the Bulls are a team that want to be doing a whole lot of draft and stash, but that late in the draft, you can't really go wrong. Like you guys have said, if you see a guy that you think has potential, you just go for it. So I gave them an A as well. I think they might have gotten the steal of the draft, taking Patrick Williams there. He might end up being, the best overall pro from everything that I've seen down the line if everything works out for him. So I was pretty excited about that.
I live on the other side of this coin, right, where I see him being more along the lines of like a Chris Singleton. Remember him coming out of Florida State? Like we see guys like this come out of Florida State fairly often where I think he's going to be more of a product of the system than the system was a product of his talent, right? Because if you look at, he also played with another guy who we'll be talking about later, on that team too. And the way I look at it is like, if you have two guys who are just like Camp Mintz defensive prospects, right? I think it would have yielded more fruit, so to speak, for the team collectively, right? I had him 34th on my board, and I know a lot of people are going to throw rocks at me, right? But I've had him like that since March. And maybe this is my rookie year of evaluating talent. I quit reviewing guys and quit trying to pick them apart so much around June, July timeframe. So maybe I need to reassess how I evaluate talent. But I'm not a big believer in his offense. I don't think that offense is going to come around on a professional level. And that defense, I think he's going to be more of a good help defender than he is more of like a one-on-one style defender. And I've been hearing some people echo that same sentiment. I think that he's kind of he's going to be kind of a victim of the herd mentality a little bit, right? Where like one team's like, oh, I'm really high on this guy. And then the next team's like, well, I didn't have him that high, but they do. Maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe I need to go. And then, that went up the chain so much so that the number 2 pick, he could have been the number 2 pick in this draft. So I don't know. And then two, I don't know if Chicago's in a place where they need to be looking at drafting and stashing talent, especially at 44 when you had guys like Paul Reed available. I'm surprised that Paul Reed fell so far. I'm really high on him. Jordan Narwa, I think, would have been a really good asset for this team. Isaiah Joe as well, if they could have got him. Cassius Stanley was still there. He's my guy. So I felt like they passed up on a lot of good guys who could have contributed immediately for a team that's looking to make the playoffs sooner than they are later down the line, in which Simonovic, if that is how you say his name, could be giving you, right?
Yeah.
So we'll roll into Cleveland. Austin, what did you grade Cleveland's draft as?
I gave them a C. I just because of who was available at their pick, and I know you guys like Isaac Okoro, but I don't think he's, I don't think he belonged at that high in the draft. If Obi Toppin's still there, I don't know how they don't take him. I know they've got a lot of big guys on that roster already, but I kind of believe in best guy available, especially for a team like Cleveland that doesn't really have a direction. They don't really have a star. I think they're going to probably be looking to try to move at least one of those big guys by the trade deadline. So I wasn't really very high on that Isaac Okoro pick. I know he obviously he's got an NBA ready body for sure. And, he is a freak athlete and he's great defensively, but I think they had a chance to get an offensive star in Obi Toppin, and I don't know why they passed on him. So I gave them a C minus.
Okay. Yeah. And Lee, I'll give it to you real quick after this. I had Okoro further down my board than most. If I'm looking at my board, and he's 16th on my board. I know people are really high on his defensive potential. People kind of have spoke glowingly about his passing ability, but watching him on field and even just looking at his stats, like he didn't pass the ball, a whole lot in college, and maybe that's just him being the guy that had to generate the offense so much. His shooting is obviously questionable, and I think fit had a lot to do with where I graded this too, right? Because in Cleveland, it's not like he's gonna like everything is gonna fall into place just because that they drafted Isaac Okoro, and I don't think that he's gonna really develop to his best case scenario on this team, which, like you were just saying, Austin, is kind of bereft of any other perimeter talent except him. That's going to put a lot of pressure on him. What do you think, Lee?
Yeah. So I gave the Cavs a D on this. I had Okoro 17th, so I wasn't too far off of where you were, Steven. I mean,
Okay.
the one thing I'll say, two things I'll say to kind of push back or defend a little bit. Number one, I might be saying this just about no matter who Cleveland took, because it's just such a tough situation to go into. I mean, Isaac Okoro is a really good prospect. I mean, I still had a top 20 grade on him. I do see the optimism in his passing. I know it didn't bear out in the assist numbers, but he's kind of one of those guys who, like, he makes the extra pass, or he just hits somebody in the lane, or a nice little dump off bounce pass to a big man. So I do think there's some unearthed like facilitation ability for Okoro. He can't shoot yet. I mean, that's just a fact. So in terms of where they got him, you know, he went 5th. I had him 17th on my board. I just don't think in good conscience I can really give that a great grade. I would have taken Halliburton, Okongwu, Kira Lewis, Obi Toppin, Benny Advia, Jalen Smith, Sadiq Bey. I mean, there was so many other guys.
Julian Hayes.
Hayes, right. But again, you know, the Cavs, unfortunately, are just, you know, it's a tough spot to be in for any young player. So I hope I'm wrong. I hope Okoro come in and make a huge difference for them. But I just I kind of see a player that I do like in certain ways, unfortunately, kind of going off to the island of misfit toys and kind of getting lost in translation a little bit here.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that we're all kind of echoing that same sentiment. And I think fit had so much to do with this for me, Lee. I know that we had a couple more teams that we had planned to discuss, Lee, and just due to the way that our analysis broke down, I know you said you needed to be out of here by 6:45 tonight. That's just only a couple minutes away. We still had 4 teams that we wanted to discuss. I just, you know, want to respect your time and just the amount of attention that you were able to give the show today, brother. Before I let you go, do you got anything that you want to share with the listeners or the viewers?
Yeah, sure. So, and thank you. I really appreciate it. Hopefully we can get back together and get our schedules and kind of finish this thing out, because it's a blast to talk draft with you guys.
Sure.
As always, you guys can see kind of on my nameplate here, you can follow me at Which Carolina on Twitter. I will have a Hornets draft grade analysis article coming out over the next couple days. And I'll also be having a couple more NBA draft podcasts coming out in the next couple of days. So just go to my Twitter page and check me out if you've enjoyed listening to my opinions. And again, I thank you guys very, very much for always having me on.
We love having you on, man. We appreciate you coming on and spending time with us for sure.
Yeah, and thank you for just being nice to my ridiculous takes on some of these draft prospects that, you know, we don't share the same mind, right? But, you know, one of the beautiful thing is that one of us will end up being right. You know, with us having different
it's going to be so
right?
fun in like 2 years to be able to be like, hey, remember that guy you liked? He sucks.
Yeah, right.
But same for me. That's why it's so fun, you know?
Not even in the league anymore.
Yeah, remember when everyone was like Cassius Stanley shouldn't even be drafted, and now he's like league MVP? You know? So. Yeah. All right, man. Well, Lee, we'll talk to you later, man. We will definitely have you back on, and we'll finish these draft grades out, man, because it's just like you said, it's too fun, and you're too smart to not have you back here on the show, brother.
Hey, y'all are the best, man. Talk to you later.
All right, man.
Have a good one.
All right, Austin. That was Lee Branscome of the Carolina podcast and of hoopsprospects.com.
It was.
What did you think overall? Did you it seemed like you were kind of in agreement with him on a lot of these things.
You know, honestly, I felt like he and I were kind of hitting the same aspects of the picks and stuff. You know, I don't know as much. I didn't follow the second round as much as the first. I'm not as into it as you guys were this year. I didn't do as much, you know, pre-draft kind of research on a lot of these guys. So, you know, it was a little bit more, you know, first round, related for me. I was actually pretty ready for Dallas next. So
I was too. And I kind of I almost wanted to put him in a tough spot to where he had to tell us to stop, but, you know, respect him too much, man. And he's a big friend, again, not only of just our show, but the network at large. I've seen him on, you know, Couch Coach's show. I've seen him on, Chris LeBron's show. There's probably others that I'm missing too. He's just a big friend of the network at large, and
dude.
Obviously would love to have him back on. So
Yes.
I'm gonna respect his time. But
sure.
Before we close out, man, I just think that we had planned for the show, and obviously it didn't really bear out the way that we had planned time wise, right? But
that's okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk with you a little bit about how you think that free agency has gone so far.
It's been more exciting than I expected. The lack of big name stars in this free agency class kind of had me thinking that, I probably wouldn't be that into it this year. And, there's not going to be many big moves, but a lot of teams made a lot of moves to get better. And a lot of teams made some really head scratching moves, I think, too. One was a team that we had kind of just talked about a little bit with how good they had drafted is the Detroit Pistons. And it seems like they just decided to sign every big guy that was available and go after every power forward and center they could. They let Christian Wood go, who is somebody I think they definitely needed to re-sign and should have. That should have been their number one priority. And then they go after Plumlee and Jahlil Okafor.
They got Jeremy Grant away from Denver. They did trade for DeLon Wright, and they did draft Killian Hayes, and they still do have Derrick Rose. So I know that we're going to beat them up, and rightfully so, right? Because we did it to the Knicks last off season. We got to be unbiased and beat them up. Beat the Pistons up this offseason, right? They took what the Knicks did and put it on steroids. I made a joke on Twitter where the Pistons saw Myers Leonard re-sign with the Heat, and I shared that MJ thing where he's like, and I took that personally, so they went and just got every other big man in free agency.
Right. Yeah, I saw that was pretty funny. I didn't like the fact they just got off of the stretch provision that they used on Josh Smith. They just got out from under that. And it almost seems
when
like
Stan Van Gundy was their coach, right? Yeah.
And it almost seems like they're heading right back into a situation where they're going to have to use it again on one of these guys. And it could possibly be Blake Griffin, if he's not healthy or if he's not, worth the amount of money that they're paying him, which I think his contract is huge. It's one of like the 10 or 11 highest paid players in the NBA. So, I do like Blake Griffin a lot. If he comes back and is anything close to what he was before, maybe he can be an all-star again, but $40 million a year is a lot to pay a guy like that. I think that's near where he's at. And, I didn't understand a lot of the moves they made. And then on the other side, a couple of the teams who made moves that I really, really like are the Lakers and
go ahead and let's just stop right there because you're a big Laker fanboy, and I'm really high on what the Lakers are doing next year. And rumor has it that they're not done. They could be potentially getting back the Gasol brother that they traded to bring in the other Gasol brother.
Well, the Gasols just love the Lakers. What can I say? They just want to be here. I hope Mark comes. I think if he's honest with himself about wanting to win a title before he retires, another one. If it's down to Toronto and the Lakers, I don't think there's really a competition there if that's what his goal is. But some guys like where they're at and they get comfortable. And I don't know. I wouldn't want to play home games in Tampa this year if I were him. But that's just me.
There's nothing wrong with Tampa.
Yeah, but it's not Toronto.
This is coming from the guy that's living in Indiana. So
true. Yeah, but I know I have a lot of room to talk. But I just think Wesley Matthews, I think, is a little bit of an upgrade from Danny Green. Maybe
a whole lot of an upgrade.
The numbers that from last year don't really bear that out, but I do think he is an upgrade. We re-signed KCP, which was somebody I really wanted to keep. He had a much better playoffs than people give him credit for. He was, I think I mentioned it once, but he made the most threes of any Laker in any playoffs ever.
Yeah,
this year. So, and he shot almost 40%. So you can't beat that. He's a terrific defender. Then they go out and they move Danny Green for, who I thought should be the sixth man of the year. And then they go out and sign the actual sixth man of the year.
Yeah, my sixth man of the year. Let me ask you something real quick, Austin, because you're a Laker fan first and then a LeBron James fan second, right? But anyone who's watched the NBA has kept up with the career of LeBron James because, let's face it, he's one of, if not the best players of all time.
Mm-hmm.
In your experience in, maybe just even picking on LeBron James, I've done my fair share of it, watching the NBA and growing up. Is this going to be not the best as far as names on paper? I'm just talking about ability to still play really good NBA basketball, not just stand in a corner and shoot, not just defend, but to be able to compete in multiple areas of the NBA game. Is this going to be one of the deepest teams that LeBron James has ever had?
I mean, I think you kind of have to say that, yeah. For all the people that knock him for having so much help, this is just going to be more fuel to that fire for sure. You bring in a guy like Montrezl Harrell, who I think is kind of exactly what Dwight Howard was for them last year, just a lot better and a lot younger. Offensively a lot better for sure. He's going to be that energy guy that comes in off the bench and is kind of demonstrative, pounds his chest when he makes a great play. And I like players like that. I think every team needs that. This is obviously all hinging on the fact that Anthony Davis does still come back, which I think is a foregone conclusion. Yeah. But you still never know. Things get weird sometimes. Who knows? But I do think that'll happen. I didn't like losing Rajon Rondo, but getting Dennis Schroeder is
Rondo.
Yeah, is a huge pickup. Offensively, the Lakers got significantly better. Whereas last year, it was like AD and LeBron and anybody else has a decent game and we're going to win. Now they've got 4 or 5 legitimate guys that can go out there and get them buckets at any given time. Trez is going to score. Dennis Schroeder is going to score. I mean, they were both over 18 points a game last year. And bringing in Wesley Matthews, you don't really have that drop off defensively like you would from losing Danny Green. Nope. And so I'm extremely excited.
You still got Kyle Kuzma, you still got Alex Caruso.
Right.
You did lose Avery Bradley to the Miami Heat, Miami, I think, has had a really good offseason.
Miami made some good moves. So did Phoenix. Portland's going to be about 12 deep, aren't they? Jeez.
They may not even have to they already didn't really necessarily have to trade for James Harden. But if they keep things the way that they are, you're talking about having lineups that will consist of, Kyrie Irving, Karis LeVert, Joe Harris, Kevin Durant, DeAndre Jordan, Jared Allen, Jeff Green, Spencer Dinwiddie, all of these players that can come in and give you significant minutes off the bench and do a good job doing it too, right? So they did well. Some of the bigger re-signings that happened that I want to just kind of touch on real quick. The guy that everyone was saying was going to be the biggest free agent in this year's draft was Fred VanVleet. He ends up re-signing with the Toronto Raptors, right, on a, 4 years, $85 million contract. In your mind, right, they lost out on Serge Ibaka, who went to the Clippers. Yep. They may be losing out on Marc Gasol to either Spain or the Lakers. He could come back. But in bringing back Fred VanVleet to this team, how much more difficult do you think that makes their, kind of Giannis sweepstakes standings? Does that knock them back a little bit? Because remember, OG Anunoby is still going to be he's going to be able to be extended the following season, and they just extended Pascal Siakam the year prior. They are going to have some help with Kyle Lowry coming off the books next season. Maybe he comes back. I don't imagine him being able to walk away.
Right.
Does this hurt Toronto's standings in the Giannis sweepstakes in your eyes?
I don't know. I think VanVleet is probably an asset that Giannis would look at and be happy to have as a teammate. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, financially, I don't know if what their cap will look like next year and if they'll have the ability to go after him. And Pascal Siakam's good, but he really let me down a lot in the playoffs and in the bubble this year. So I'm not so sure that they're maybe as high on my list for destinations for him as they were, a few months ago before the bubble. I don't know. I don't think you can say re-signing VanVleet hurts this team really in any way. I'm not as big as on the loss of Marc Gasol. I don't know how much that hurts them really compared to Ibaka. I think Ibaka is going to be who they miss the most for sure. So it's up in the air. I did actually just do an article about, the Milwaukee Bucks offseason. It's up on offtheballnetwork.com right now. You can go check it out. It's there you go. It's the first edition in a series I called Did They Do Enough? Where it's going to look at 5 teams that are kind of in different places in the league. You know, they're not all going to be the 5 best teams in the NBA. It's not all going to be, did they do enough to win a title? It might be, did they do enough to make the playoffs? Or did they do enough to get better? You know, there's going to be, it's kind of every level. But I did the Bucks first. And, you know, I even, not to give too much away, but I'm not super high on some of the moves they made either. So I do see Giannis eventually leaving. I think if he wants to win a title, I think he needs to leave. And I do think Miami or Dallas are probably the 2 most, attractive destinations for him. Dallas didn't do anything to hurt their chances to get him next year. And Miami definitely didn't do anything to hurt their chances to get him next year. You know, both of those teams still have picks available. Both of those teams still have good young talent with rising stars, whereas Milwaukee's kind of put a cap on what they can do now. You know, they gave up a lot of draft capital. I like Drew Holiday, but statistically, he's not that big of an improvement on Bledsoe. And then with losing George Hill, here's what I didn't get. They said they needed to add floor spacers and shooting, and they don't re-sign Kyle Korver, and they trade George Hill, who George Hill had the number 1 3-point percentage in the league last year, and Kyle Korver is the active leader in 3-point shooting. So
they did bring in DJ Augustine.
Yes, they did. I did like that move. I did like that move a lot. I think that's a big plus for them.
And they did bring in Bobby Portis, who is a capable, kind of stretch big. So in the areas that they lost shooting, I think that you're not going to see, this is not your 2 seasons ago Milwaukee Bucks team where it's going to look the exact same. I think that Budenholzer is going to feel a little bit of heat to make this roster look a little bit different, just because it does. For one, I don't think that they're going to be able to play the same way with the acquisitions that they made. One more re-signing that I wanted to talk to you about before we move on to a different segment is where did it go? I'm sorry. The Clippers re-signing Marcus Morris. This one kind of struck me as a little bit odd because I didn't think that Morris was going to go back there. With the way that things fizzled out with the head coach being gone, with reportedly a lot of teammates weren't happy with the way that Paul George and Kawhi conducted themselves, with Montrezl Harrell leaving, then that probably significantly hurts their championship standings or likelihood, if you will,
especially where he went.
Exactly.
If he had gone to a team in the Eastern Conference that was in the middle of the pack, maybe adding Serge Ibaka kind of offsets that to an extent, but the Lakers adding him and them losing him, it just widens the gap in my eyes.
Yeah. So do you, obviously you're not as high on that re-signing, like I am. I'm not high on it either. Right. So
yeah, I don't know. It seems like a lot of money and a big time commitment for a guy that's, a 10-point a game scorer who's kind of just, almost like a goon, really. And I don't know. I don't know what the Clippers are doing, really. Obviously, I don't think they have a leader in the locker room. It doesn't seem that way. It kind of sounded like Montrezl Harrell didn't really like being there. I've heard that from more than one place. And
the fact that he left the team for only a mid-level exception for a couple seasons, as opposed to going to, like you said, a bad team and chasing the bag. I mean, I think that hurts more. I think that you would have been fine with him leaving and going to like an Atlanta or going to a Charlotte and getting paid, as opposed to saying, I'm just going to empty out my locker, move across the hallway, and compete against you guys for a ring for a couple seasons.
Right.
Maybe that ups his value down the line. Yeah.
It's not the money. It's not the location. It's just, I don't want to play with you guys. That kind of says a lot to me. And
it's not me, it's you.
And I don't know. It seems like Kawhi Leonard would be the type of teammate you'd want to play with, but it doesn't seem that way. I don't know. But they made the coaching change, I think, was a net negative for them ultimately. Obviously, Ibaka's a step down. He is still good. I still like Ibaka. I like that signing. But, Morris didn't really move the needle one way or the other for me. I don't know where would be a better fit for him than the Clippers. And it seemed like they were pretty intent on keeping him with the amount of money they gave him for the amount of years that he got. So obviously they like him more than we do, but I wasn't too high on that one either. No.
Well, the other way I can evaluate this, right, is that they're obviously over the cap with the max contracts that they have out for guys like Leonard and guys like Paul George, right? So the only way that you can be equitable in establishing trade assets is, using the bird rights, right? So I basically look at Morris as a guy who's probably going to be moved in a trade for another player.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, one more guy that I want to touch on real quick that, forgive me for kind of passing over this, but this one was huge to me. The Minnesota Timberwolves re-signing Malik Beasley. First off, this guy just had charges pressed against him last month, consisting of aggravated assault, like having a gun pointed at someone who's at a home tour. Like this is a normal thing that happens in a suburb of Minnesota where people drive around the neighborhoods and they look at houses. And this is like a thing that happens in this neighborhood. Malik Beasley and his girlfriend came out, pointed a gun at this family, and told them to, get the F out, right?
Right.
And there was a search warrant given after this, right? And police officers, do with this information what you will, went and found a couple pounds, almost 2 pounds of marijuana in the facility, right? Like, I'm not saying that, like I said, evaluate that however you want, right? But yeah, so after this, he receives a 4-year, $60 million deal with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Not only is it crazy because of the charges, but they just also drafted Anthony Edwards.
Yeah, it seems like a very Minnesota Timberwolves move to me, of a franchise that's stuck, keeps getting in their own way. I mean, you can go all the way back to when they had Kevin Garnett, and they never really built a decent team around him. And they've never built a good team around Karl Anthony Towns. And now they finally seem like they have, at least a guy that he's happy to play with that was an all-star at one point, D'Angelo Russell, and is young. And they had the top pick, and they take Anthony Edwards. But this is a guy that played, 14 games for Minnesota last year after coming over from Denver.
Did well, though.
Yeah, he did do pretty well for them. He averaged 20 points a game in those 14 games. So
42% from deep, 5 rebounds a game. Like it's a pretty good skill set.
Right, but is that the outlier, or is that who he is? Because in all the rest of his time in Denver, he never averaged more than 11 points a game. So
he also didn't get much burn because of just how deep Denver just like habitually stays. They stay deep.
True, but I think Denver's a pretty good run franchise, and if he's a guy they're willing to give up, there's a reason for it. And then those charges like that, I mean, like you said, take the marijuana charge however you want, but the more odd thing to me is the gun thing in general. Like that's kind of scary. It seems like a poor judgment, lack of judgment, inability to make good decisions, kind of. That can leak onto the court a lot. And with a young team like they have, is he a good locker room presence to have in there? I don't really know, but it doesn't sound like it.
These are questions that come out when you make poor decisions off the court, right? And throwing $60 million at a guy like that, who, like I said, just last month had charges.
And there's a lot of options, I felt like, for wing players that they could have used that money on, that maybe would that at the very least wouldn't give you all these questions and this much pause, due to off the court issues. So like I said, I just think the Timberwolves have perpetually been stuck in their own way. I like the Anthony Edwards pick though. I mean, I do think he will be a pretty good player, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like a good move to me.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it's pretty bad when you have the charges pressed against you. And I don't know how many teams were willing to say, who we need to give $60 million to? Malik. Right. So I'm not sure how in demand that he was for them to have to sign him to that large of a deal.
Yeah.
Austin, with the remaining free agency time that we have, with the remaining guys that we have available, do you see room for any other kind of bigger moves, or do you think that the rosters are decently set moving forward?
I think for the most part, you've seen the big name signings are pretty much all done. You've seen the most big movement that I think we're going to see. Kyle Korver is a name that I still haven't heard signing anywhere yet. He's somebody that I do think has a lot of value. And, I did like Golden State bringing back Kent Bazemore. That was one.
This kind of funky move. I like it.
Yeah, it seems like he played his best basketball there, at least it seemed like. And, so I think he was a decent pickup for a team that is just, they're paying outrageous tax bill for Kelly Oubre. I mean, I think just that Kelly Oubre signing added like $66 million to their tax bill. And like I heard on NBA radio, the only way, even if your owner's a multi-billionaire like Joe Lacob is, and even if he's dedicated on winning and willing to spend that money, I don't know if it's the right time or the right piece to spend that kind of tax bill on. Does it push them into championship contention? I don't think so. And I think that's really the only way you can justify a move like that. One of the other big names, obviously Gordon Hayward. I was kind of hoping he'd come home to the Pacers. I would have liked that, but it sounded like the Celtics were asking for way too much in return. They got greedy, and I think that this is a perfect example of when people say, "Oh, if Danny Ainge calls your team, don't pick up the phone." I get the joke, but is he that great? I mean, he made a lot of good moves to get a lot of picks. When he was first GM there, and since he's been president, he's made a lot of good moves. But he's missed on some of those picks for Hayward. But they might not, and so that says a lot to me. And then also, I just felt like this is the first time really you can say, Ainge got, because I think he thought they had all the leverage in this deal. I think he thought the Pacers were the only place that Gordon Hayward was willing to go, and didn't really think about the fact that, he signed an offer sheet with Charlotte back in 2014 and then it was matched. So I think it's a good pickup for Charlotte. They had definitely overpaid, but teams like Charlotte have to overpay to get.
That's just a small market tax.
That's the way it works.
Pay. Yeah.
$40 million overpay possibly maybe is a little crazy, but the Pacers may have been offering $100 million, which, I could see. A $25 million deal. So then, that $20 million more is an easy way to kind of separate yourself from the competition, but we'll never really know everything that went into that. But I do like it. I do think that could, with the LaMelo Ball draft pick and Grant Riller and all those guys that they got, I do think they could be a push for a playoff spot this year, possibly in the East. Maybe not, but it might be a year or two away. But they're definitely going to be a much more exciting team. As I had them ranked last in the Eastern Conference on my way too early power rankings. They definitely moved up the rankings for me with these moves that they've made. So ultimately, I think it's been fun and exciting free agency. I think there's been a lot of moves that I didn't necessarily see coming. There hasn't really been that huge superstar trade, of James Harden, I think, as everybody wants to see, or Russell Westbrook, so we'll see what happens there. Yeah, but I think wherever he goes, their team's going to be excited to have him. Whether or not they should be remains to be seen. I don't know, but we'll see how the rest of it goes. But I do think most of the big names have landed where they're going to be.
Yeah, and that's a fair take. I think that James Harden trade that you were touching on is that's the one that everyone's expecting. There are the rumors that Bradley Beal could be out. John Wall reportedly wants out of Washington, and there apparently have been exploratory talks on swapping Westbrook for John Wall. Now what really makes me think that trade could happen is that the way that John Wall's contract is insured, because it is so high, it's I think it's the top 5 in the NBA as far as annual value.
Yeah.
That the way, because he's missed so much time, and if he is injured again and misses significantly more time, that the NBA will pay that due to the insurance on the contract, as opposed to Tillman Fertitta, who we all know benefits from casino and restaurant money, which again, we all know lost a lot of business. So I could see Tillman Fertitta taking a cheap way out, right? And
he even said that they need to cut payroll. He said that they're not going to be spending money. So, that is a good take. That's a good point.
Yeah. And then we'll see how, Brody and Bill play next to each other if Bill stays there. But all in all, I think you're right. I've paid attention to a lot of these acquisitions because on offtheballnetwork.com, I have a running NBA acquisitions and where I provide grades and analysis on each one of the moves, where you typically have to pay to get those insights, from the other guys. and it's not completely up to date yet. I believe I'm up to the Carmelo Anthony re-signing, but by today, tomorrow time frame, I should be up there because deals have slowed down. And after day one, they have steadily slowed down. So I should be caught up here soon. But go back and take a look at these. I know it's kind of hard to keep up with all of them unless you're in it like every day, like how Austin and I are. So if you missed out on, your team maybe signing a lower end rotational guy, I provide the grade and the analysis on what they potentially bring to the team.
And to give everybody out there an idea of just how crazy you have to be this into it, I went to bed at like fairly late last night. I don't remember what time, but it was fairly late. And I woke up to 75 notifications from Twitter, and that was just from Shams, and that was it. So 75 updates overnight. So it is a lot of info to keep up with. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. There were a couple guys, that have been signed that I never even heard of. That the guard from Spain, I'm not gonna lie. My international basketball knowledge is weak to say the least. But from what I read about him, he seems like another good pickup. Real quick, before we're done, I do want to ask you, who do you think are the 3 teams that have improved themselves the most?
That have improved themselves the most?
I know I'm putting you on the spot. Sorry.
That's tough. No, you're quite fine. I would say Portland is definitely up there with me with bringing in Robert Covington, with bringing in back Carmelo Anthony. They brought back Rodney Hood. They brought in Enes Kanter. They look like they're going to be deep. They look like they're going to be a good team. I would be remiss if I passed up on Phoenix. I think bringing in Chris Paul, bringing in Jay Crowder. They didn't draft as well I would have liked. We'll talk about that on future draft grade shows. They brought in Jalen Smith, who's kind of a funky center for that team. I really would have liked to see like a Sadiq Bey go to that squad. So I would put Phoenix up there too. I'm probably gonna say another team that I could later go back and look again, but I would say Miami, just basically running back the team, but then bringing in a guy like Mo Harkless and bringing in a guy like Avery Bradley, drafting Precious Achiuwa, who I wasn't as high on, but if he does develop into what Miami wants him to, and if Miami believes in him, my idea or my perception of him automatically goes up.
Me too.
Outside of the vacuum that I analyze him in, maybe I'm missing something. But I think Miami did a lot to improve themselves too. Teams like Brooklyn already had high expectations. It would be hard for them to kind of top those. Same for the Lakers. The Bucks, I think, have kind of maybe met or maybe slightly improved my expectations. I know that they mortgaged the farm, for the house, right? But if everything breaks well, I mean, they could be a better looking team this season than
in my mind. The way I look at the Bucks is, did they get better? Yes. Did they get better enough for what they gave up? I don't think so.
Yeah.
So I like Drew Holiday a lot, but I don't like him 3 picks and 2 pick swaps a lot.
Yeah. He's not enough in my mind, right? To where
you're starting and backup point guards.
Right. So my thing with the Drew Holiday selection is like, does it make the team a little bit more well-rounded? To me, he's more like a Chris Middleton type player, right? Who shouldn't be a second option. So they have 2 third options instead of a second. And then we talk all the time about how, in the finals, when the game slows down, is Giannis the guy that you want with the ball in your hand, or do you want him to be, the Anthony Davis on team, who's still a great player, an MVP level player? But is he a creator for others? Is he someone that the team has to worry about on all aspects of the game? And I don't believe so, right? So I think that they got better in new, different ways. But again, like if I'm talking about improvement from last season, right? They were the number 1 seed in the East. They lost in the first round. I don't know with this team. They may make it out of the first round this year. Who knows, right? So I think that's where they kind of get a little better.
Yeah, definitely. My 3 that I think improved the most were Portland, Atlanta, and I did have the Lakers, but I'm a homer, so I won't beat on that drum too much.
They did improve.
They did get a lot better. I think on paper compared to last year, I think they're head and shoulders above where they were at this point last year. But last year worked out pretty well. So,
yeah, it's scary for the NBA right now.
Right. And you got to love what Atlanta's done. Adding Rajon Rondo, adding possibly Bogdanovich if
Danilo Gallinari, Chris Dunn.
Match Chris Dunn, great pickup.
Absolutely.
Danilo Gallinari, great pickup. I think they vaulted into a playoff contender in the East easily.
It's kind of hard with Rondo, right? Because we see him do so well on like just good teams like Boston and the Lakers, right? But we've seen what Rajon Rondo looked like in Dallas and in Sacramento. New Orleans, he kind of bounced back a lot better in
pretty good with New Orleans.
Yeah, in New Orleans he was good.
I think he was all about the money this time. Obviously I think it was time for him to get paid and
again,
go after the biggest contract. He hasn't really ever gotten that big deal. He kind of got hurt right when the time was for him to get that major contract. So I think money was a little bit more of a motivating factor maybe than it would have been in years past.
I mean, he's a two-time champion. What else you got to do, right?
Right. And it's kind of like what Fred VanVleet said. He won a title already. It's time to cash out, And they brought up an interesting topic on NBA radio the other day. It was Amin El Hassan was talking about he thinks they should do away with max contracts in the NBA and then how it would kind of spread out the talent.
I've heard this.
You wouldn't really be able to have 2 or 3 stars on a team. I kind of like that idea, but then you would probably see like what he talked about where, with the Lakers, LeBron James plays for $5 million this year and then $50 million the next year. And then Anthony Davis plays for $50 million this year. And so, there'd be ways to work around it, but ultimately I think too, it would be interesting to see. I'm always kind of a fan of the free market idea. I think, and professional sports are the only profession where if you're the best, the very, very best at what you do, there's a cap on how much money you can really make. And so, they make plenty of money as it is, but it was just an interesting topic that I think would be kind of fun to see.
Yeah. And to me, it's never really going to be a perfect unless you like what the NBA struggles with, right, is being able to say, no, LeBron James, you can't specifically play with X, Y, or Z player. Like until they get to that point to where they just like ultimately do what we do on this show, right? And say like, all right, these are your superstars. These are your best in the world. Evaluate guys in tiers and say tier 1 player, you can only have one tier 1 player on your team. Like I would like they can't do that because then you could probably get into a lot of legality issues by, basically saying like, how can you quantify these intangible things that make this player better than this guy and prevent them from making X amount of money and stuff like that.
Right.
Like the concept of it, I think sounds really cool. But like when you get into like the legality of it, I think you obviously would end up in a world of trouble.
And, every so often it's good to have just a dynasty that's, the Warriors, I think, was good for basketball. It kind of, for a long time, it gave everybody a team to kind of root against. They dominate, yes, but they also had the best record in NBA history and didn't win the title that year. And so, I think the way it is now is great. It was just a fun kind of little, mental exercise to think about. And one other thing that I thought was really interesting, since I mentioned that 73-9 team, they went 73-9 that year. The Spurs went 40-1 at home, and neither team won the title. Like that's insane. It just kind of goes to show you, the regular season only means so much. But free agency has been a lot of fun. I think we got a little off topic there, but who cares? It's been a fun show for sure.
Yeah, it certainly has. And Austin, you mentioned that you have a project going on where you're going to be breaking down into segments, on what each team did. Did they do enough? We'll probably start seeing more of those pump out, obviously, when free agency starts coming more to like more of a drip than it is a flow right now. Right. And I have that running article up on the NBA acquisitions and grades. All those things are available on offtheballnetwork.com. Go there for all your sporting needs. Our buddy Jeff and co-vice president of the network just did the Buckeye remix, and I pay more attention to the Buckeyes now than I ever have. I know that was kind of a source. I know that might be a little bit of a sore subject for you right now, Austin.
Not at all.
No? You were pretty happy with the way the game went?
First off, the Hoosiers were a 20-point underdog, and I put quite a bit of money on them to cover that spread. So I didn't think they'd actually win, but I didn't think they'd lose by 20. So I made a good little chunk of change, and they proved to me that they can compete with the best teams in the country. So I was actually pretty happy. I didn't expect a win. A win would have been great, but sometimes there's levels to this. And while Ohio State fans may say that there's no such thing as a moral victory, an IU fan kind of there is, because we've never really been that good. So I was excited as heck just to see them compete in that game.
Yeah, and I love Jeff so much, man, because when he evaluates this Ohio State team, man, there are no kid gloves. There's not even teenager gloves or young adult gloves. Like, there's senior citizen gloves for this team because they're just so good for so long.
Cranky old man.
Yeah, and I'm just like, I would love for my team to give up that amount of yards and still walk away with the win.
Right.
If the Razorbacks ever gave up 500 yards and won, I'd be like, that was a fantastic game from the Razorbacks.
Tell you what, that IU quarterback, Michael Penix, is a stud, dude. He might make it at the next level. I don't know. He seems pretty good.
Is he a pro quarterback or is he just a really good college quarterback?
He probably just, I don't know. Has there ever been a pro quarterback at IU? But I don't know. Ohio State's got one of the better defenses in the country, talent-wise at least, and he
not according to Jeff.
No, well, what they say. They're the third team in the country. They can only be so bad,
right?
But I see a lot of things I like from him. I don't know. I don't evaluate quarterbacks that well like that, so I don't pretend to know what makes a quarterback better than another.
Nice. And just breaking news. I know the only reason I'm going to put this out there is because we have a lot of Nick fans on the Off the Ball Network. They just got their point guard of the future for this young team. They got Austin Rivers. They just signed him to a 3-year, $10 million contract. So it's pretty
overpaid too.
Yeah, pretty.
Nerlens Noel.
Yeah, the Knicks, I think, they're doing enough to look capable. They are signing a lot of CAA guys, which they do have the ties with Leon Rose. So all right, you're being really obvious that you're targeting your own guys right now. Mm-hmm. But at least they are bringing in capable players.
They got the most NBA ready guy in the draft, and with all these moves they've made, they're not going to be. They're going to be drafting pretty high again next year. Let's say that, and
which they should want to be doing.
Exactly.
You didn't want the number 1 pick in this year's draft. You wanted the next couple.
So adding some guys that aren't gonna maybe work out right away, or maybe that are only on 1-year deals might be the way to go. Build this thing through the draft because they've never really tried that before. So they always seem to try to build through free agency. So I think building through the draft for them is a good sign that at least it's not going to be the same thing it's always been, where they just expect these free agents to come and they never do.
So. Well, there you go. All right, Austin, man. Well, I think that we've held the people on long enough, and just want to say real quick, if you've been watching and listening now or later, we just really appreciate all the love and support.
Always.
Yep, that you guys give us. It means the world to us. Our guy Kieran Pruitt on the network said that he just listened to our last show. I don't know if you saw his comment on our Twitter, and he was just like,
appreciate the love.
Yeah, he was just saying you guys have grown a lot. It was a really great show, and it's not just lip service. It really does mean a lot to you and I, Austin, right? Mm-hmm.
Oh, for sure. Definitely. Yeah. Anybody that has anything good to say about me talking live on the internet, I'm happy with, because I'm probably my biggest critic for sure. And so, to hear other people say that we have gotten better, it made my day, seeing that, even if it is coming from a guy that, is just part of our team and maybe he's just trying to be nice, but I don't think so. But, and so, it's nice to hear that we do a good job, because we do work hard at it.
Yeah, man, and I think you do a phenomenal job, if I do say so myself, right?
So do you.
Trust me,
I did my first time hosting a show, kind of running things on Friday.
I watched,
and I definitely have a little bit of a newfound respect for everything that you do. It was a little, I don't want to say overwhelming, but I was a little nervous. I was a little nervous at first, trying to navigate my way through everything. But I think I did pretty well for my first time. So
y'all did awesome. It was an amazing show, and you're talking about the fantasy football show that you run with. What's the new gentleman's name? Go ahead and boost that out real quick.
Scott Odie and I, it's called the Sharps Money Fantasy Show. It is a little bit fantasy football, a little bit sports betting. We're going to give you, some bets that we think you can hit some money on in the NFL games. We're going to give you who we think is good guys to play in fantasy, good guys to sit down, guys that maybe don't have a great matchup. And then we're going to try to, teach you a little bit about different aspects of different fantasy games. Last week, the first episode, we talked a little bit about defensive players playing with individual defensive players.
That was awesome. Yeah.
And then, we talked a little bit about Dynasty League, strategy. And those are things that are new to me too. So it was kind of fun. It was definitely a lot of fun to do. So I'm looking forward to keep doing that again, but it was on Friday. I'm not 100% sure that that's going to be the day. I think it probably will be the day that we do it going forward. At least that's the best day for me. I still have to talk with Scott because I think he does have a bowling league that he's in on Friday nights. So we'll figure out an exact day for sure, but we're going to be doing that every week for the rest of the season at least. So definitely check that out.
Yeah, it was a great episode. I was able to listen to it a little bit, and I felt that you guys, y'all have a very good chemistry, and speaking off of each other, I thought went very well.
He's a really nice guy. Scott's a good dude, so
yeah, he was nice enough to listen
fit in
to
well.
Comments. Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff. All right, Austin. Well, as our brother, Couch Coach Live says, this effectively puts a nice little bow on our episode today. Just want to encourage you, the viewers and listeners, to go and follow Austin. You can hit him up on Twitter at AustinCar10. You can hit me up on Twitter at StephenBTG, which obviously stands for Breaking the Game, which is the name of our show that we do here. Just do us a favor. If you like what you hear, just go ahead and like, share, subscribe, and review. 5 stars is greatly appreciated anywhere that you can, review our podcast.
Yes,
and you can follow just our podcast at large on Twitter and Instagram at BTG NBA Pod. That's also available on Facebook at BTG NBA on there. And go hit up offtheballnetwork.com again for all of your sports needs. Austin,
tons of great content on there right now for sure. Check it out. And don't miss, we're going to have the rest of our tiers here soon. Don't forget, we've still got more tiers to get into. So I'm excited about that.
Absolutely. We're all over the place. We're analyzing the off season. We're assessing the draft, and we're still trying to let you guys know before next season starts next month who we project to be the better players in the NBA, where everybody falls in the echelon of the NBA.
Hey, good point. It's a month from today, isn't it?
Yep, it sure is. Nice. So give thanks. Give thanks this year for the season that you had this week. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. Spend some time with some loved ones. Don't spend too much time keeping up with basketball. That's what Austin and I are here for, right? Yep.
We'll be keeping up with it. Don't worry. We'll have everything that goes down for you guys.
Yep, and it'll all be up on offtheballnetwork.com. Right.
All right.
Yes. All right. Well, for Austin Carr, my better half here on this show, my awesome co-host, for myself, for Off the Ball Network, you guys, the viewers and listeners, have been awesome. We will catch up with you guys next time. Much love, everybody.
Have a good one.